Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach for Maine Woodland Owners. We are a membership organization based in Augusta, where we provide resources and expertise to woodland owners in Maine, about 1,000 acres or less, more or less. We do that through a resource website, informative email blasts, educational programming like this one, and our monthly newsletter. So I'm hopeful that a lot of the folks watching are members or might want to be members at some point. You can visit us at mainewoodlandowners.org and you'll see a link for membership. It's very easy to become a member, and it's a great way to stay in touch with what's going on in Maine around woodland issues. And it's a great resource to learn a few things. Tonight's program is legislative update. It's late April, and it's time to check in with our fearless leaders, Tom Doak and Carla Black, who spend an enormous amount of time in the legislature this time of year. They're following several dozen bills right now that pertain to the the well-being of our woodland owners, and so they do this so you don't have to, I guess you could say. So not only are they following these bills, they're going into the legislature, they're testifying, they're communicating with public officials about our position and serving as the voices of Maine's woodland owners. So we're lucky to have this resource. This is one of the biggest services we try to provide our members, because for a lot of you, you don't have the time, or you don't have the collective group like we do. We have a membership of over, close to 2,200. So we have a good voice and we get listened to in the legislature. So Carla is here. She's our deputy director. Tom Doak will be jumping in as soon as he's off a phone call. And but Carla really she's been writing articles each month for the past several months about what's going on in the legislature. And also, we are involved in this recent appeal to a lawsuit ruling that pertains to Sunday hunting. So I'm sure Carla is going to touch upon that. But this is certainly an extension to the newsletter articles that she's written over the past couple of months. So and she is ready to answer your questions if she can. Some of these issues don't have answers, and they may just be one of those things where people are going to have to be okay with the fact that we're not going to know for a while about some of these bills. So without any further ado, we have Carla Black, and we're very lucky to have her. She's been our deputy director since for just over a year, and she's picked up a lot of information, and she's gained a lot of experience in this process. So glad you can be here tonight, Carla.
Thank you very much.
The mic is yours.
Thanks so much, Jen. Thanks for the nice introduction. I am Carla Black. I'm the deputy executive director here. At some point, Jen is going to have to jump off the call, and I'm going to be sort of watching the show for more people who are participating. So if I'm seeming distracted or looking away, it's because I'm looking for new participants. So I'll try to do both gracefully.
Oh, Carla, I'm going to also jump in real quick too. I forgot this is important. So Carla's going to go through presentation of the different bills. And it's up to you, Carla. You can talk about each bill, and you'll be talking about each bill individually. But then if you want to take questions, just let everybody know that this is a good time to ask questions about that bill. Or if you want to wait till the end and take questions, either way is fine. To ask a question, there's a couple ways you can do that. The chat box is great. That way we can collect the questions. Everybody can see the questions being asked, and they can and then Carla can answer that way. The other is if you mouse below the screen, again, you'll see an icon called reactions, and you click on that. And then there's a button that says raise hand. That's a great way for Carla to, and for me, I'll be on for a few more minutes to see if there's any questions. But then the other is just turning your mic on and just raising your hand if you have your screen on, your camera on, and just say you have a question. But so hopefully that will help everybody decide how they're going to ask their questions. And but the chat box is, to me, one of the best ways to do that. So, okay, so that's done. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I forgot about that part.
That's all right.
Okay.
I'm hoping Tom is going to join us. He just tried to ring me, but hopefully he'll be here in a few minutes. So I will get started a little bit and tell you a little bit what's going on in the legislature. The legislature was off to a slow start this year. They really seem to be slow to be printing their bills. But things are really picking up at this point. We were told that they're to expect over 2,000 bills that they were going to be printing. And as of today, I've looked at, I think, through 1853. So we're coming close to where we're expecting to be on the number of bills. So hopefully there's an end in sight. The legislature does have a statutory adjournment date of June 21st, I believe. So they're going to need to start really escalating things quickly if they're still printing bills in order to get the bills heard and in and out of committee. So with that, I just wanted to see if anyone had any general questions before we get started. I'm happy to take questions as we go, rather than waiting to the end. I always think it's valuable to have questions answered in the context of what we're talking about. So I'm happy to take questions as we go. So if anyone has any general questions about the legislature, the process, I'm happy to answer those if you have any. Not seeing any, so I will dive right in. As you know from our newsletter, if you follow it, Sunday hunting is a big issue for Maine woodland owners. There have been 4 bills that have been printed this session regarding Sunday hunting. There's a LD 626, which allows youth to hunt on Sundays with permission. There's LD 672, which would establish a youth deer hunting weekend. LD 1166, which would allow landowners on their own land if they own 5 acres. And then LD 1241, which would allow someone to hunt with a bow and arrow or a crossbow. These bills had their public hearings earlier in April, and they have been scheduled for a work session coming up on May 10th. So we're sort of in the middle of the process with these bills. I'm happy to say that Maine woodland owners was well represented in the public hearings on these bills in opposition to them. We saw lots of testimony that was submitted after we put out our request for Maine woodland owners to respond. And you did, and we appreciated that. We know your voices were heard with the legislators. We've had several comment to us that they've heard from many of our members. So we appreciate that, and it really does make an impact. One of the things that we did ask this session or put out as an option was to email committee members. And I know a lot of people did that, and that had a particular impact as well. So we appreciate that. We are optimistic that the bills will ultimately die. They are likely to come out of committee. I guess what I should back up and say is we're not sure how they'll come out of committee. We're not sure if they will move these 4 bills forward and have divided reports on the bills, or if they will try to take one and champion just one bill and move that forward. So we do expect that the votes would be somewhere on the line of 10-3 or 9-4. In opposition to these bills. Tom, is there anything you want to say about Sunday hunting generally?
No, I think we're just grateful that members really did respond, and those with some really good comments. And even a couple of the legislators that are in favor of it, I think are pausing now to think, because they were told they believed there wasn't going to be an impact, and they got these really good notes and messages and direct conversation, direct feedback from members, and they are now pausing to say, I got to think about this a little bit. So that's been really a really positive thing. And it also helps the people that don't want this, it helps back them up, and gives them a really good reason. They didn't want it, the legislators were opposed in the first place, but it gives them additional ammunition, if you will, to keep to their vote. So it was really important that happened, and it was a really good turnout from our members.
So we will certainly keep you posted as the work session nears, and if we're hearing anything different, but we'll certainly keep you posted at what happens at the work session. I'm sure we'll put out some information, or it'll be in the newsletter regarding how those votes come about. I did also want to just touch briefly on the amicus brief that was announced in the recent newsletter that Maine woodland owners will be filing in the lawsuit. I'm sure many of you at this point now are well versed in the lawsuit that was filed against the Commissioner of the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife based on the new right to food amendment that basically saying that the new constitutional amendment involving right to food supersedes the ability of the commissioner to enforce the Sunday hunting statute. So that lawsuit was in Superior Court, and it was dismissed by the Superior Court Justice without much explanation, just that the plaintiffs had failed to state a claim upon which relief could be granted. And the plaintiffs appealed to the Supreme Court. And so with that, we have an opportunity to submit an amicus brief, which is a friend of the court brief, which usually they're used by parties who are not a party to the lawsuit, but have some information that they can share with the court that will help the court understand the impacts of the lawsuit. So we're in a good position as representing landowners to share a lot regarding what we feel will be the impact of the lawsuit or impact of the claims if they were to go forward, if Sunday hunting were enacted, particularly that it would mean a loss of access for landowners in Maine. That's really what our amicus brief is focused on. We're still fine tuning that, and it will be filed at the Supreme Court on May 4th. And we will certainly have a copy of that on our website as soon as it's filed and available for the public to review. Anything else on that, Tom?
Nope.
Okay. So I will move on. We have some forestry bills that we have testified on. And the first one is LD 993, an act to facilitate stakeholder input regarding forest policy in Maine. This bill originally created a 21-member board that was appointed by the Speaker, the President of the Senate, and the Governor. So it was kind of a political appointment board. And the goal was to provide guidance on a variety of issues identified in the bill, such as advising on conditions and trends in the forest, facilitating dialogue among diverse interests involving forestry matters, and promoting cooperation among state agencies concerning forestry matters. We testified in opposition to the bill. We felt that the board was not necessary. We believe that Maine Forest Service pulls together stakeholder groups when they're needed, and that should be sufficient. An amendment was offered at the work session that pared down the board to 10 or 11 individuals, and they would all be appointed by the governor instead of the Speaker and the President as well. And the duties were limited, although I haven't seen the draft of the amendments, so I'm not sure how the duties were limited, but it's my understanding that they were. Tom, you looked like you had a question there. Did I?
No.
Okay.
I was looking for a document.
Okay, I thought maybe I gotten that one wrong.
No.
There was a party line vote in the committee on the bill. So the Democrats were in favor and the Republicans were opposed. So it will come out as a divided report. And And that's where that one stands. And again, just if anyone has any questions, please feel free to speak up as we go through these. I know our time is short, so I want to get through them, but don't want to miss your questions if you have any. The next bill is LD 108, which was an act to establish a logger relations advocate within the Maine Forest Service. This bill would require the Forest Service to establish a logger relations advocate to serve as an advocate to the public. And we testified neither for nor against on this bill based on the fact that we didn't know what the position would do or why it was needed. We felt that it created an imbalance by favoring one stakeholder group over another. The committee didn't seem to have much appetite for this bill, so they voted ought not to pass, and that bill is now dead. LD 180 is an act to allow a person to file a paper copy of a timber harvest notification form. And this bill provides that a landowner or designated agent may submit harvest notification forms to the Maine Forest Service in an electronic or paper copy. And that's significant because the Maine Forest Service moved to purely an electronic system within the last couple of years. They do assist anyone who needs assistance with filing if someone doesn't have regular service, internet service, or if they're just unsure how to do the filing, the Forest Service will assist them with doing that. We testified neither for nor against on that bill. We suggested that that there was perhaps more that the Maine Forest Service could do to make it clear that their help is available for filing, that they could advertise that more and make it more known that they were available to assist folks with filing. And we also suggested that they could convene a stakeholder group to determine any shortcomings of the filing system. The committee ultimately voted ought not to pass on that bill, and the bill is dead. The majority of the committee did send a letter to the director of the Forest Service, basically encouraging her to continue to work with the filers, especially those who struggle with the online process. LD 1048 is an act regarding the authority of municipalities to regulate timber harvesting. This bill was brought last session and it got caught up in some politics, I think, and it died pending reference to committee, so it never actually had a public hearing. We brought it forward again this session, and the recommendations in the bill are the result of a stakeholder group that was pulled together by the Maine Forest Service, and Tom was a member of that group. The bill establishes new timelines for municipalities to come into compliance with the process requirements for adopting timber harvesting ordinances. The bill received great support at the public hearing, and the committee voted ought to pass as amended with a minor amendment. The bill is currently stalled on unfinished business on the Senate calendar. Tom, is there more you want to say about that one?
Well, it was a unanimous vote of the advisory, the stakeholder group, and it was that put it together. It was a unanimous vote of the ACF committee, which is normally those bills go very quickly through the system. But this one is fraught with politics, and we don't know if there'll actually be a vote on it or not. It's kind of one of these strange, has a life of its own or something. So even the municipalities are in favor of it. So, but it's tied up in politics.
Yeah, so it made it further than last time, but we'll wait and see how that moves forward, if it does at all.
It's just highly unusual to have a unanimous committee vote not come up to a vote in the chambers.
Great. The next bill is moving on to some tree growth bills. The next one is LD 341, an act to amend the Maine tree growth tax law to encourage housing construction. This bill would allow, if you're in the tree growth program, it It would allow you to remove the minimum lot size from the program for new housing construction that needs to be completed within 2 years. And you would incur the lesser of the penalties if you remove it under those circumstances. It also provided that you can remove 1 parcel per lot annually, and the bill did have a sunset provision. Tom assisted the sponsor with making changes to the bill that would make it palatable. And we testified in support, and there was quite a bit of testimony in opposition, including the Maine Forest Service and Maine Municipal. The committee voted along party lines. I believe the Republicans were in favor of the bill and the Democrats were opposed. So there will be a divided report on that bill as well. LD 1135, an act to ensure that carbon credits can be sold on forest land enrolled in the Maine tree growth tax law. This was our bill sponsored by Representative Boyle of Gorham to begin the discussion regarding the compatibility of the tree growth tax law program and participation in carbon sequestration programs. Our original thought was to include carbon as a forest product in the statute, but after discussion with Maine Forest Service and the Maine Forest Products Council, we determined a better first step would be to offer an amendment to the bill to have the Maine Forest Service and the Maine Revenue Services work together to issue guidance on whether carbon programs are compatible with the tree growth tax law. Maine Forest Products Council testified in support of the amendment, and Maine Forest Service testified neither for nor against. At the work session, the committee determined that, and we agreed with the approach that they could reach the same outcome by sending a letter rather than creating a resolve. So they determined to send a letter to the Maine Forest Service and the Maine Revenue Services, encouraging them to work together to issue guidance the recommendation would be to update Bulletin 19, which is put out by the Maine Revenue Services regarding the tree growth tax law program. So in that vein, because the letter was seen as appropriate, the bill was voted ought not to pass. But I think we're happy with that result and think that it would be a good first step to advance the conversations about carbon and the tree growth tax law program. Tom, anything on that one, or do you want to talk about the open space?
Just that the committee gave us a really good opportunity, I think, to talk about carbon programs and the importance of dealing with this issue and people in clarifying for people that want to think about carbon that are in tree growth, so they don't get crosswise. So I think the committee recognized the need for this work, and so that was, I think, a good sign here. There is a bill. I don't have the LD number. Do you?
LD 1648, which is an act to make changes to the farm and open space tax law.
So this is the their open space and tree growth are both current use taxation programs aimed at taxing land its current use instead of its development value. And while tree growth has had multiple reviews, and open space really has not had very much since looking at it since its inception in the early 70s. And frankly, it needs an overhaul to make it more effective. And so we were going to put a bill in, but the Nature Conservancy actually had a title in, so we kind of been working with them on an approach, and it would kind of simplify open space, but those in open space would get some additional benefits that they don't have now to make it more interesting to be in the program, and more of a reduction in your taxes than current, because the reduction is not very favorable, frankly, and a lot of people don't find it worthwhile to be in that program if the savings in taxes aren't enough. But the draft also gives credit for if you are in if you agree to certain standards for carbon, you get some additional discount. And also if you can manage a wildlife habitat that important wildlife habitat that you can manage and approve plan with the Fish and Wildlife Department, that you could get some additional reductions. So there's, I think, some good changes likely to come from the open space program bill, but there are a whole bunch of ideas there, and it hasn't had a hearing yet. And I'm guessing this one's going to take some time to work through. Right? This is not going to be just a simple one work session, I think. But it does need some adjustment, I think, to make it work right. We'll keep everybody updated on that one, but it's an alternative to the tree bill tax law program, and I think there are more people that probably ought to be in it than aren't. So.
And I did see the Nature Conservancy today, and they still have no idea of when the bill will be scheduled for hearing. So, but as we're running out of time, hopefully it will come up soon if it's going to need more time to work on. The next bill is LD 928, which is a resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Maine to establish a right to a clean and healthy environment. And just as it says, it's another constitutional amendment affording everyone the right to a clean and healthy environment and preservation of the natural, cultural, and healthful qualities of the environment. If you have any idea what that means, feel free to speak up because it's very vague. We testified in opposition to the bill because we were not clear on what the impact on landowners would be of such a constitutional amendment. And as we've seen with the right to food amendment, we indicated that that we felt that it would result in litigation. It received a party line vote in committee. The Democrats were in favor, the Republicans were opposed. So it was reported out as a divided report. And it's been on the House calendar's unfinished business since it was reported out. So they're hanging on to that one for a while. I think they're probably trying to work it to see if they have the votes. It requires a 2/3 vote of both bodies. And interestingly enough, the governor doesn't get to weigh in on bills involving constitutional amendments, resolutions involving constitutional amendments. So it would just, it'll come down to whether it gets the 2/3 vote of the legislature.
And if it does, it then goes out to the voters.
Then it goes out to the voters.
2/3, they even put it out to the voters.
Yeah. LD 614, an act to provide free antlerless deer permit to certain landowners who allow the public to hunt on their property. This bill provides an antlerless deer permit at no cost for all eligible landowners who apply for a permit and keep their lands open to hunting by the public. We testified in support of the bill, but suggested perhaps an amendment. The current system for antlerless deer permits, and Tom, weigh in if I'm getting this wrong, is that the commissioner can give special consideration to landowners. Can give special consideration to landowners who keep their land open to hunting by the public by providing at least 25% of the available antlerless deer permits in a district to eligible landowners, and that's done in the form of a lottery. And there's currently a $12 fee for that if you're chosen in the lottery. So we suggested that rather than eliminating the lottery, that the lottery be retained and that the $12 fee be waived for those landowners who are selected in the lottery. The bill was tabled at the work session and hasn't been taken off the table yet, so there's still more to come on that one. The next one is LD 461, an act regarding private roads. And I see my friend Roberta Manter here, who has experience with this bill as well. The bill makes a change to the definition of a private way in Title 23 to have the same meaning as a public easement, and created a new definition for private road. There was an amendment that was offered by the Maine Alliance for Road Associations that put together a partial amendment and said that regarding definitions, that between 30 and 40 statutes would need to be amended to fix all the definitional changes that would be required. The other changes in the Maine Alliance for Road Associations amendment were related to the operation of private road associations. We testified neither for nor against this bill and urged the committee to take the recommendation of the Abandoned and Discontinued Roads Commission's suggestion to hold the bill over, so the commission has more time to review it and any implications of making these changes to definitions. No work session has been scheduled on that yet. And then LD 732. An act to prohibit off-trail operation of a snowmobile in an area closed to off-trail operation. This bill prohibits a person from operating a snowmobile off-trail in an area that is posted as being closed to off-trail snowmobile operation. It provides for a civil fine of not less than $100 and not more than $500. We testified in support of this bill. We have good relationships with snowmobile organizations. But complaints seem to be on the rise, anything from damage to small trees to operating in areas where landowners don't want them. We raised a few questions concerning the bill, such as what a trail means, and is there a standard for how trails must be posted? And at this hearing, an amendment was offered by the Warden Service that I think addressed several of the issues that we raised. That bill was just heard this week. And so there's been no work session scheduled on that yet. And those were the bills that I had to report on.
Do you have the language of 1685, which is the tree growth one about 25 acres and that one? Do you have
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have it on my list, but I could look it up if you want.
I think that's something that people in tree growth would want to know about.
That was the number of it?
1685.
Oh, 1685, right. This is an act to increase acreage eligibility and change requirements for filing plans under the Maine tree growth tax law.
It would increase if I remember right, it increases the minimum acreage in tree growth from 10 to 25. I think it proposes to remove everybody that's less than 25 acres from the program, which, is what everybody fears will happen when you're if you're in a program that you get in and then you can change the rules and you'd be subject to a penalty because the Constitution requires a penalty for anybody that leaves a current use taxation program. So you can't get out without a penalty, which is a big problem with this bill, obviously. And then it also requires management plans to be submitted directly and to the assessor in every community. And they're still confidential documents, but they have the right to possess them. Right now, the statute says they can request, you do not have to submit it to the town unless you're asked by the assessor. The assessor can review can hold the plan as long as they need to determine whether you're in compliance or not, but then must return it and keep it as a confidential document. So we've been round and round on that issue in the past, but which I don't understand because they can get it anytime they want, but I'm not sure. I wouldn't personally be in favor of having to file every one of these with the town, but also the problem of moving people less than 25 acres from tree growth would be a real issue. So the bill is a Maine Municipal Association bill. It hasn't had a hearing or it isn't even scheduled yet. I don't think, Carla, is it?
No, it's not scheduled yet.
But it's one that we clearly will be opposing, as we've been down that road a few times with tree growth on this. But it would be a big impact on anybody less than 25 acres. So it's not a good thing.
Are there other bills that you can think of, Tom, that I've missed?
Trying to think of all the ones we've been chasing around. Not that I can remember off the top of my head. I got my list in front of me, but does anybody have a question or a comment or disagreement with where we are on a bill, or wonder how we got to a position on something, or anything like that? I'd be happy to hear any of that.
Go ahead, Roberta.
Just to give you a little bit more detail on the 461, the one that has to do with the definition of private way. When we realized how complicated it was going to be, we agreed that that part of the bill should be held out and give us time to go over it and see what the ramifications would be. Because the problem with the term private way is that in some parts of the law, it means a private road that's privately owned and maintained. And in other parts of the law, it means it's a public easement that the public is free to use. So we're trying to reconcile that and make sure that we have clear terms so that you know what you mean when you use the terminology. But that's going to take some work. So we're hoping you'll set that part aside.
I should mention that both Carla and Roberta Mantor are on the what do we call it? The
Discontinued and Abandoned Roads Commission.
Right, which is a permanent commission the legislature established last year in response to all the issues that have been raised about the status of these roads. And so to avoid annual legislation, I think it was like have a commission that can look at it and see if we can solve we've made a lot of progress, I think, in the last few years on this, but it's a commission that would help, take these issues on and make recommendations to the legislature for some additional changes, which I think is a good positive, frankly, step that is needed. And I guess I'm hopeful that there'll be some real progress coming from that group.
Tom, there's a question in the chat that probably would be for you. Anything new on carbon credits and how they are valued?
There's a lot of going on in carbon credits, and I think there is a program that's now available in 8 states that was developed by the American Forest Foundation and the Nature Conservancy, and it's called the Family Forest Carbon Program, and it's been approved by the carbon registries, and so it's been through quite a review. It's not available yet in Maine, but it has 2 components. One is delaying harvest except for personal use, like firewood, for if you have a certain amount of volume up to 20 years, and you're paid. You're essentially paid $300 per acre, over that 20 years. So it's not 300 a year; it's 300 total over the 20 years to defer harvest while it accumulates carbon. And then there's a second component that says, well, if you don't want to do that, it has some very specific things about if you create openings only a certain size and only a certain percentage of removal, you can be paid, and that's I think that's 20 years, but maybe 10. It's about $200 over that period of time. So there's that program that's available in 8 states, Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, not in Maine yet, but it's supposedly coming. So that's something that probably would work for some landowners. Is there a question? No. So, and then the one that's been in play for most of the smaller owners has been a program called NCX, which allows you to defer a harvest for a year and compensate you. They use a formula to determine what the likelihood you would be of harvesting and compensate you for a year. That did not get approved under any of the carbon registries that are in existence. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in that program. They have been offering it, but they have said they're on hiatus, I think, as far as any new enrollments. So I don't know if they're going to reconstitute that or continue that, but that's one that would have been of interest to small landowners.
Tom, none of these are have anything to do with the legislature, right? This is all
Right.
the
No,
outside thing.
in fact, it was an interesting discussion at the taxation committee this week on the bill about clarifying the role of tree growth and carbon. And there was a issue raised by a couple of the legislators that felt that instead of having a carbon program telling people in Maine how they need to manage their land to qualify, that we should have a carbon program and tell them how, if they want to buy carbon, you have to do it, you have to agree to these conditions. Well, that's not how it works. And there was a discussion about, well, maybe we need a Maine, a new program specific for Maine. I would say that issue did not get much approval in the taxation committee. And again, they did not want to go down that road. I do think, though, that the NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, that cost shares a lot of practices on family woodland owners, the smaller woodland owners, timber stand improvement, tree planting, pruning, all those activities they've done that for many years. They are looking at practices that would cost share that would benefit carbon. So I think you'll see, you don't have to sign up for a 20-year program or sell your carbon, but if you implement a practice, there'll likely be some money available to help you implement that practice. And I think that is probably where the next bunch of action comes on carbon.
Okay, Michael Ricci says he's sorry to see the elimination of paper harvest notification forms. The electronic app can be a real pain. I'd like to see both accepted.
Yeah, Mike, glad to see you, Mike. Mike's been a long time member, and Mike is a former forest ranger and is a pretty significant landowner, and hope you're doing well, Mike. The issue is it's so time consuming on the paper side for the Forest Service to process and these, that they did move a couple of years ago to an electronic format. And there is some adjustment, and they still allow some, they will file it for you if you call them and give the information if you don't want the form, do the form yourself. But it was kind of a process of moving forward with how you could efficiently handle it, because the Forest Service gets, I think it's 10. Yeah, it's 10,000. I think it's 10,000. And I understand it can be time consuming. Once you sign up, Mike, once you sign up and you're in their system, it's relatively easy, and there's a map online that you can use and things like that. It does take some getting used to it, yes, and it is an inconvenience for some landowners for sure. I think the good part of it is there was some fraud going on, to be honest with you, with the paper copies, because you could sign somebody else's name, and the Forest Service, and Mike is a forest ranger, former forest ranger, I'm sure you may have seen or be aware that could happen. And this way it kind of cuts down on a little bit of this fraud. And so in some ways it's helpful to the landowner that way, but I do understand for some it's a pain. There's a question about, do you know what species of trees or what stage of growth sequesters the most carbon? Yes, I can tell you that. So in general, hardwood trees, so about half the weight of a tree is carbon. So think of a hardwood tree would sequester more than a softwood tree because it weighs more. So you think about, that's kind of the simple way to think of it. The young trees, the young forest sequesters carbon more quickly than an old forest. So a young So carbon sequestration peaks at about 15 to 20 years in age. So there's two things to think about in carbon. There's how much is stored and then how much is sequestered annually. So a young forest pulls more out of the air, than an old forest does. But the old forest contains a lot more carbon, obviously, than a younger forest. So they both kind of work together. But if you're thinking about an annual sequestering, a younger forest is where you will sequester more than a older forest. And that's kind of not understood. People think we just don't want to, we should stop cutting trees and we'll sequester more carbon. And that's really not true. Eventually a forest, the growth stops and then can go backwards, obviously, as it gets older and trees start to die. So you need both. You need that younger forest to sequester it, and you need to store the carbon or put it in a solid wood product. And that's, so it's that balance that really works together. So, any other questions or comments? Or you can also unmute and ask if you'd like. You don't have to. You don't have to use the chat if you don't. You'd rather not. I don't see any other questions, Carla.
All right. Well, thank you. If there are no other questions, thank you all for coming. We appreciate you, your interest in the legislative update, and we will keep you informed of happenings in the legislature through updates. And Roberta has a question.
I was just wondering if your members know the process for submitting testimony on bills online, because it's really pretty easy for anybody that doesn't want to.
When we sent out the alert on the Sunday hunting, we had very specific instructions there, how to do it, click here and that kind of stuff. So we have a system that we produce that it shows you exactly how to do it. And as we said, I think one of the things that was really effective this time was you could submit testimony to everybody, but we also put the email addresses for all the members of the committee. And some people did both, submitted testimony, but also sent messages to individual legislators. And that, I think Richard Ness was on. I don't think I guess he still is. But when a legislature gets a direct message, they almost kind of have to respond to it, don't they, Richard, as opposed to just somebody submitting testimony. So there was a back and forth going on from our members and some of the committee members, which I think was really helpful to our cause.
Yeah, I would agree with Tom, and especially if you're communicating with your state representative or senator, that really is the key. I mean, if you're a legislator, you pay a lot of attention to you should pay a lot of attention to your constituents. It makes a big difference.
You almost have to respond, don't you, Richard? If you get an email directly from one of your constituents, you kind of have to respond, as opposed to somebody submitting legislation to the committee. You can read it or not, but you get their attention if you've got a direct email from a constituent.
Yeah, there's this thing about getting reelected that motivates a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all. When will there be another one of these? We did one last month, I think, right? We did it. I think
it was earlier than that, but I forget.
Was it? I mean, now that things are really going, we could probably do this. We certainly should do another one in May. And we expect they'll be in session till the end of June. But things will start to pick up here. They've already started to pick up. So we'll look at the right time to schedule them, but there's a lot of things pending right now, but the real voting and stuff will be happening here. I don't know, Carla, 2 or 3 more weeks maybe, or something.
I
like
would
that.
think, I mean, it's starting, you're starting to see things on the calendar now. So I would think things are going to start moving pretty quickly here.
The one thing, like when a bill comes out of the committee, we've got to vote. We know the vote, but we might need help from our members on when it goes to the full chambers, because that's, the committee vote is just that. I mean, that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen on the bill, but so sometimes we need help, with the votes when it's going to the House, the full House of the full Senate. And if we do, we'll send a note out to folks and say, hey, can you help us out on this one? Okay, good to see some familiar faces, our names anyway, and thank you for taking the time here to do this. And if you have any questions on any particular bill, you should feel free to reach out to either Carla or me, and we're happy to talk to you about any bill, about anything. So feel free and do reach out to us if you have a question or comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks.